Hi guys, the episode that you're just about to listen to is generously sponsored by our affiliates Board Game Crate. Board Game Crate provide a monthly subscription service where they get fresh new games delivered straight to your door. Just head over to www.boardgamecrate.co.uk, and furthermore, if you use our discount code UnluckyFrogIsAwesome, all lowercase, all one word, you'll get a cheeky little discount. It's easy to remember because it's true.
Hello and welcome to the Unlucky Frog Gaming Podcast. I am your host, Ben Porter, joined by my co-host, Charlotte Porter.
Hello.
And we have Frank West from City of Games on the show with us this week.
Hello.
Hello, Frank. Hello.
How are you, Frank?
Yeah, no, I'm wonderful. Thanks, guys. How are you guys?
We're good.
It's nice to hear that you're wonderful, considering you are in the middle of a Kickstarter campaign.
I've truly managed to make this the busiest 2 months of my life, I think, and it's been absolutely fantastic. But I love it. I mean, I love pressure and I love hard work. So
There, great.
Good.
So Frank currently has a game called Isle of Cats on Kickstarter. We'll talk a bit more in depth about that later on in the show. But first, we'll talk a bit about what we've been up to and all that sort of thing.
Yes.
So first things first, we have been chucked right into the deep end of preparing for Tabletop Scotland.
Yes. It's been good though. It's been good.
So do you want to talk a little bit about what we've been doing, Charlotte?
Yeah, so as you may well know, we are the official media partner for Tabletop Scotland. So we are in the middle of organising the recordings for the live seminars and just sort of managing the audio desks and things like that. And also the questions and stuff for the panels. So we've been constructing Google Forms left, right and centre for all the seminars with all the questions, so that if anybody's got any questions, you can submit them. So I will put the links up for that.
Well,
so
have the links in
the
show notes,
Yep.
so you can check that out and you can submit a question for one of the panels that we'll be having at Tabletop Scotland.
Yeah.
But so that falls at the end of August. I think it's the 25th.
24th,
25th.
Yeah.
I should really know that.
You should know that.
Yeah.
It's good though. No one else knows, so repeat it as much as
Yeah, so it'd be great to see you there if you can make it. We'll be running all over the place, facilitating live events, but we will have on the 24th, the Saturday, we'll be doing the pub quiz.
Yes.
But before that, we'll be doing game night with Unlucky Frog.
Yep.
And we'll be playing List It and Cockroach Poker with some friends of the show.
Yep.
Live.
So it should be good fun. And there will be audience participation.
Yeah.
Audience participation is mandatory.
What could possibly go wrong? And it's worthwhile saying that Richard of We're Not Wizards, he'll be doing a live show.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a friend of Frank's as well.
Yes.
That means that I can't be at the convention because me and Richard have a rule that basically we're never at the same show. It's been non-stop for the last 18 months. Every time I've not been able to make a show, he's been able to make it and vice versa. So I think it's a sign.
Well, maybe we could just rotate you out. We'll just
so next year,
outside whilst Richard's inside.
Or even just next year, Richard, you can't come.
So, this man is banned. We'll have his picture.
Hey, I did not say this, Richard. It was not me.
But he'll be hosting the panel on Kickstarter. Which is quite apt for tonight's
Crowdfunding
episode.
101, I believe, is the term.
Yeah.
The name of it. Yeah.
And we'll have a few guests.
Yes. Yeah.
For that as well. Yes. So it'll be good. It'll be a good weekend.
Yeah.
But gaming
wise,
yes,
we actually do game. We don't just
done quite a few games this week actually.
Events and record podcasts, contrary to popular belief. So I went to G3.
Yes, which
on
is
Saturday.
One of the local sort of. Oh yeah, of course.
Saturday just passed. That's run by Glasgow Games Group. It's or rather, they're called G3. This is really confusing. They're called G3. The event is Glasgow Games Gathering.
Yep.
So there was debate about whether they were going to call the event G3. So it's Glasgow Gamers Group running Glasgow Games Gathering.
But they're also based in the G3 postcode.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to make things even more confusing.
So to be abundantly clear, I was at Glasgow Games Gathering,
Yes.
which is the one-day event and not the regular club night.
Yes.
Following this, Frank?
I am. I think so. Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of G's in my head. So,
so it was a one-day event. It was hosted at Bellhausen Sports Centre. What was quite nice about this was there was a little bit more of the sort of miniatures games, the war gaming. Lots of friends of the show there as well. One Free Elephant, Dream Big Games, Bad Cat, Cardboard and Coffee. So they pretty much split the hall in half. So the one half was like the sort of traditional wargaming stuff, and then the other half was all the sort of more modern board gaming. I was very well behaved and only picked up one game.
You did.
Yeah.
It was a good game you picked up.
I did. I picked up Sushi Roll.
Yes.
Because it's one that I was really, really keen to try and play at UK Games Expo, but I just could not get near the stand. Because I don't know if you...
So this is the new dice roll.
Yes.
Version, right?
Yeah, correct. It's the same designer, it's got the same cutesy aesthetic, but like Frank's saying, it's dice drafting instead of card drafting. I don't know if you found this at Expo, Frank, but like Friday's traditionally the sort of quieter day. Friday was mental.
Yeah, it was really, really busy. I mean, for me, my perspective obviously is slightly different because UK Games Expo is my primary show for being on my booth. Yeah. So I literally don't leave the booth. But the traffic that we had, the amount of people coming into our booth on Friday was much more than I've experienced in previous years.
Yeah. So saying that to say, when you realise how busy the Friday was, that sort of sets the tone for the whole weekend. I couldn't get near the Coil Spring stand, which is a good thing, right? Because it means that more people are engaging. But I finally got my own copy of Sushi Roll, and we had a little play of it, didn't we?
It was good fun.
Yeah. So what did you think of it compared to the...
I liked it because, again, I kind of thought, like compared to Sushi Go Party, is it going to be different enough, or is it just going to be they're just swapping out one thing for another thing? But actually, it did feel a lot more random, I would say, even in its in how you play it. I really enjoyed it, and it did feel different enough, but within the same sort of family of games.
But
does it take the same length of time to play, or is it quite different?
No, I would say it's roughly the same sort of length, really.
Roughly the same sort of length, and I think you could... It still occupies that same sort of place on the gaming spectrum, I think, where, you could play it with kids, you could play it with people that have a passing at best interest in games. It's still very lightweight. The rule sheet's basically a 4-page leaflet.
Okay.
And the good thing is that all the player boards show you how many times each symbol occurs on each dice and how many points everything's worth. So you're not having to constantly consult books. To that end.
It's really nice for the smaller games to do that, because it means that you can see that they're also targeting gamers and people who actually, they want to think about these things, and the people who like those details, as well as the lighter people who probably don't even consider that side of it.
Yeah. It ticked a lot of boxes for me, and like you, I was maybe a wee bit worried that they were just substituting a gimmick in.
Yeah.
But I feel like it is different enough from Sushi Go to stand up on its own.
Yeah.
I still think that Sushi Go Party is one of the best games ever. But Sushi Roll's still a good game, and I think it is still worthwhile checking out. And I think particularly for groups that have a lot of families and kids.
Yeah.
Because what kid does not love chucking dice?
Yeah, it's more tactile as well.
Yeah, that's true. And you can play it with 2 players as well.
Does it still have the kind of the artwork side of it? Because one of the things I love about Sushi Go is obviously when you've got the cards and the pictures, they're quite cute and fun. So does the dice lose that?
No, it's the exact same dice, embossed.
Yeah,
So it's like embossed onto it, but it's the exact same designs, so you would recognise it. It's like the wee smiley faces of the sushi and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's really good. It's really, and the dice are really well made. They're really nice
chunky dice.
Dice. Yeah.
Really colourful game.
Yeah.
And everything, like you're saying, Frank, it's still got that very sort of blocky, simplistic, kawaii.
Yeah,
sort
kitschy,
of art style.
almost. Yeah,
it's still got that.
Yeah.
So you look at it right away and know it's one of the Phil Walker Harding sushi games.
Yeah.
Basically.
No, I look forward to checking it out.
Yeah. We also finally got around to playing Fury of Dracula.
Yes.
Which is an old game, right? I mean, everyone forgets it's an old Games Workshop board game.
Yeah.
But it's only recently now that Wizkids have got the Games Workshop license for making board games that they've finally printed a new edition.
Yeah.
Because they were going for crazy prices for a long time, when it was just...
It's the 4th edition now, right?
It is, yeah. Because it was the previous one, the Fantasy Flight had the license for a while, but then they stopped printing it. And then the scalpers shot those prices right up.
Yeah.
But have you played Fury of Dracula, Frank?
I have, yes. So I have the 3rd edition version of the game. So, I mean, I hate to think how much 1st and 2nd edition of that game is costing and who still owns that.
Yeah.
But I have played it. I've only played it once, and it was a good few years ago, but it's a really interesting game. It provides a really fun experience, which is quite different to a lot of other games.
Yeah.
Because I think when you think of those sort of one versus many games, and especially because it's a sort of gothic one versus many game, right away you draw comparisons with Letters from Whitechapel.
Yeah.
Right? But the thing about Letters from Whitechapel is you just have to catch Jack. Like once you uncover where he is, it's game over. Jack has lost. It does mean that it's harder to find Jack, because you have the added thing in Fury of Dracula is you have to find him, and then you have to fight him.
Yeah.
And he's an all-powerful vampire lord, so... I really liked it.
I absolutely loved it. I played Dracula. So we played it, I think we played it 3 times.
Yeah.
And I will be honest and say I kept messing up. Now, some of it was just simply maybe not understanding the rules.
To be fair to you, though, like we were saying, that it does feel like a really old school board game.
Yeah.
That you can tell that it's from that sort of Arkham Horror era of board gaming, where it's a big game and there's lots of moving parts.
Yeah.
And I think with those sorts of games, you do generally need to have a couple of runs at it.
Yeah.
It's kind of that period before people started considering the learning curve of games, and they were more about, this is the experience we want to give people, and they'll work it out and then they'll enjoy it.
Back the way rather than
like it was definitely back when it was a bunch of nerdy dudes in their mum's basement playing games. It's that sort of era before it was okay to be geeky.
The one big criticism though that I do have of the game was the colour scheme. I really struggled with the colour scheme, even to the point where actually it did end up messing up the game for you halfway through.
Well, it messed up for everyone because it was basically what happened. If anyone's seen the Fury of Dracula map for the Wizkids edition, the regions are all quite sort of desaturated,
sepia tone, sort of
earthy tones.
Reds and browns.
It does mean that if your eyesight is not 100%, or sometimes even if you're low light, it's hard to discern where a region ends and one begins. And you
had asked if I was in Germany, and I said yes.
Using the psychic bond.
Yeah. And I had said yes because I was actually, what I hadn't realised was I was just over the border in Vienna, which is part of Hungary, the Austro-Hungarian region, rather than the Germany region.
Yeah.
And it was so subtle that, because I was explaining to Ben and Josh that when we were playing it is it's not that I can't, like, I'm colorblind. It's sharpness of colors when they blend together. I can't always tell where one color starts and one ends, and so I couldn't define the boundaries of the regions.
Yeah.
So I then sent them on a wild goose chase into Germany when I was hiding out in Hungary. But then I sort of told you where I think when I realised what had happened, I said, well, I'll make up to you. I have been here, so get yourselves over here and figure out what to do.
And as much as that's definitely a design flaw with the colour thing, and we've spoken about it in the podcast before about you need to make considerations with colour choice for people who are visually impaired, be that colour blindness, whatever. But it's a problem I've run into a couple of times with these sorts of one versus many hidden movement games. If you make one mistake,
you can throw it. Because the other one that I messed up on as well was I took a railway instead of a road.
Yes.
And I couldn't because on the railways are in white and the roads are in red. And you don't always see the road because the map's so small, but the railways always stand out.
And as we all know, Dracula is banned from every rail company.
He's not allowed on those trains.
He's not allowed.
Yeah, not allowed in the trains.
And the challenge that comes from it is that you don't want to make it obvious that you're looking, because if someone asks you a question, you can't really get up and move over the board, because as soon as you do that, they know that you're either there or you're very close to there. And you need to be able to know in your head the answer to these questions. You need to be able to quickly say to someone, this is yes or no. And as soon as you kind of because you're giving away information, it's about people not knowing things. And as soon as you behave in a non-direct way, you're giving them clues.
Yeah.
It's a problem that all of those sorts of hidden traitor games have. But we had said that I mentioned earlier about the comparison with Letters from Whitechapel and Fury of Dracula, but you can tell in many respects that the guys that designed Letters from Whitechapel have been thinking, well, this was a problem with Fury of Dracula that we're going to try and fix by doing this. And one of the things is that in Letters from Whitechapel, there's a number, an address, if you will, for every location. You get given a pad with the game, and you've basically got a mini GM screen with your own version of the map. So it means that you actually have to write out your route. And it's a lot more comprehensive that way, I think, than in Fury of Dracula, where you've got that terrible low-res mini-map, and like you're saying, the regions with all the colours that merge together.
Well, I ended up taking the DM screen thing from Letters of Whitechapel and using the elephant meeple that you get in Microbrew, from One Free Elephant as Dracula, just so that I could plot where I was going. Because I kept being like, right, okay, where have I been? What am I doing? What's going on?
Dracula's travelling circus.
Exactly.
I was we were at a convention a few months ago, and we were playing a space game. I think it was Century Saga or something, and I probably just butchered the name horrifically. But when we opened it up, basically all of the spaceships and all of the pieces were missing from the game, and it was a new one. And obviously we contacted them and they said to send replacements. That was fine, but we really wanted to play it, so we ended up getting my copy of City of Kings and taking all of the resource tokens out and the cubes out, and we're like, okay, so the fish are the small spaceships and the axes are the large spaceships, and we created like this little key of ridiculous information. And it's like amazing how much you can still play a game with like the wrong pieces sometimes.
Substitute pieces.
It wasn't as thematic.
I mean, the little elephant jarred a little bit with the tone of the Dracula story, and it's one of these things, like when it comes to reviewing the game, you're like, right, I'm probably going to have to come down on them for that. But at the same time, like you're saying, like just purely from the perspective of a consumer, you can sometimes just filch things from other games to fix a game.
Improvise, don't you? And having said that, I don't feel that it soured my experience of it. You know, I still felt I had an absolutely brilliant time. You did that. That's the time when you got me. You killed me.
Did,
yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want to play a vampire elephant?
There we go. That's your next game.
That's it. It's fun.
And the last game for us to talk about before we move on is Wingspan.
Yes.
Played a lot of Wingspan.
Yeah.
Who hasn't played a lot of Wingspan?
I was saying to you the other night, I think I've had over 10 plays of that game now.
It's probably the game you've played most
this year.
I would say, yeah.
And it's one of these ones where whenever a game's quite hyped up, more often than not, I'm disappointed by it.
Yeah.
I felt that way with, I think I said to you, with Gloomhaven, that I could see the appeal, but I felt that it had been blown out of proportion somewhat.
Yeah.
But with Wingspan, I just right away it clicked with me, and maybe it's just because it's an animal game.
Yeah. I love learning about the what was it? The trumpeter swan.
The trumpeter swan
is the largest.
No,
sorry.
The trumpeter swan is the heaviest bird in North America.
There you go. See,
there you go. Facts.
That's what we love.
You need facts from board games. You know, it's the most important thing.
That's it. Have you played Wingspan, Frank?
I have. I've only played it once. So one of the kind of running traits that I think a lot of people will find about me is that I like to play a lot of new games. So there's only a few games that I play more than 1 or 2 times. I would say I probably play 300 or 400 games once a year, and then there's a few games I play multiple times. So Wingspan, as soon as it came out, I played it and I tried it, and it's, as you say, it's kind of, it ticks all the boxes in terms of the production obviously is like right up there. The kind of the facts, the theme is interesting, it's different. I think for me, the game it's really good at what it's trying to do, but what it's trying to do isn't necessarily the kind of game that I want to play. Like I can see how it's been designed. I can see how for the right people, it's a really good game. For me, I generally, when I'm playing kind of engine building card kind of games, I prefer there to be a little bit more depth to it. But I think that for people who are new to engine building, people who just enjoy that kind of more relaxed, casual gaming side of things, I think it's a really, really solid game.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose we've been playing it, or I played it 3-player for the first time yesterday. But we'd only ever played it 2-player. And I think, like you're saying, what you're looking for in a game, when we're gaming, I can't play a game that's too competitive because I will get so angry at you, and it's not fair. Because then I'm stuck with you after and have to make dinner and have to be polite to you.
But Wingspan feels really, really zen.
Yeah.
And the thing that we were saying last night is I've not actually won many games of Wingspan. For all I've played it a lot, and it, as infantile as that maybe sounds, I think it tells you a lot about how well a game is designed, that
you can still enjoy it.
You lose most of the games that you play, but I still really like this game. Because
you were getting a bit irked with Quacks of Quedlinburg.
Yeah.
Because you'd played loads of it, but you'd felt as if you weren't able to win.
But it's because Quacks is so random.
Yeah.
And you've got the see the bonus dice.
Yeah.
I actually think that should just be thrown out altogether.
It's kind of win-win mechanic.
It's a win-more mechanic, yeah.
I think the joy that comes from games like Wingspan is the fact that you are effectively building an engine. You start with basically nothing, and by the end of the game, you've achieved something.
Yeah.
So the satisfaction isn't necessarily whether you've achieved something better than other people. It's just whether you've achieved something that you personally find satisfying. And that's a really, I love that kind of game design, because you just look at it at the end and you're like, I did this, and I made these decisions, and this is the thing that it's now generating, and I just had fun doing it.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. And I think that goes for a lot of the sort of tableau building games, that in many ways, like Frank's saying, it doesn't matter if you achieve the overall objective.
Yeah.
I.e. to accrue the most points. There's just something to be said for having lots of exotic birds.
Laying lots of eggs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
To see the kind of expansion for Wingspan, because obviously they're designing it and it is coming out, but not. And this is the strange thing, and I think it's what makes Wingspan so successful of what it's tried to do, is that I don't really care about the new mechanics. I just want to see the new birds.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And
let's get Birds of Paradise in there. That's what we want.
Yeah, this is something that we mentioned, is that it's got almost limitless scope for expansion, because all of the birds that feature in the Wingspan core game are in North America.
Yeah.
You could do Birds of South America.
Mm-hmm.
You could do an Australian birds expansion. You could do all sorts.
Yep.
And it could just be card packs.
Yeah. You swap in.
Yeah.
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 So from one animal game to another.
Yes.
Let's talk about Isle of Cats.
Isle of Cats.
It's a game, and it's got some cats in it. So I mean, it's definitely a good crossover.
Yeah.
And cats eat birds. So I'm not saying anything, but it's the natural evolution of this conversation.
An absolutely flawless segue there.
Yep.
I think well done, everyone. So give us a very brief overview of Isle of Cats for people that haven't heard of the game yet.
Okay, so the Isle of Cats is a 1 to 4 player. It goes up to 6 with expansions. Card drafting, cat placement game. So this is a game where you're going to be given a handful of cards. You're going to be choosing cards that do all sorts of things. You're going to use those cards to rescue cats from an island that you're then going to be placing onto a boat in front of you. All of the cats are kind of Tetris-like shapes, so they're all sorts of different shapes that you're trying to place onto your boat. But whilst most of these kind of like polyomino games, as they're referred to, that kind of exist, are quite light, friendly, kind of casual games, this is a much bigger, it's a kind of a full 90-minute experience. It's designed for people who are kind of gamers who really want to have that let's play a big game. The other side of it is there's also a solo mode, which is a completely custom kind of designed solo mode. So if you want to play through a kind of custom built polyomino experience, you can do that as a solo player. And also there is a full family mode. So if you want that lighter experience, or if you've got children or you've got friends coming over who aren't gamers, you can use this to play the family mode with them. And then you can play the kind of the full game yourself. And to kind of give an idea of the differences, the family mode is a 2-page rulebook. It's a single sheet that's double-sided, whilst the full game itself is 24 pages. Wow. So it's a substantially different version of the game, but it gives you a really good kind of learning point for people to kind of be progressed into bigger games.
That's really cool.
There's something to be said for being able to scale the difficulty of a game. I mean, as much as I think a lot of the sort of board game purist crowd will maybe be down on me for this, it's one of the things that I really like about Age of Sigmar.
Yeah,
is that it supports that bolt-on approach, that you can just use the core rules, or you can go and add in all these other ridiculous rules to the pot. I think it's encouraging to hear that we're seeing board games doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a natural evolution for so many reasons. I mean, with the City of Kings, which is obviously my first game, there are so many people who say to me they play it with their children and they like to play games with their kids. And they obviously like to play games with their friends and other people as well. But that kind of crossover of this becoming a family-based hobby rather than an individual person-based hobby is really important. And the other half of that is I have a lot of board games, and I mean, my collection now is around 800, and I have a lot of friends who come to my house and they browse my games. And there's nothing kind of more infuriating than when someone comes over who's not big into games and they pick something off the shelf and you're kind of like, you can't really play that game. It's this weird, like, I don't want to call you an idiot, but maybe we should play this instead, because you're not familiar with the mechanics, and the kind of the challenge it would give you would stop you from enjoying that game at this point.
It's a barrier to entry, really, isn't it?
Exactly. So having both of those boxes ticked works very well. One of the biggest challenges I have with this game is I love cats. I'm a cat person. I've always enjoyed cats. And so many cat games are light games. They're not kind of big gamer thinky games. I don't have a cat game where I can say, I'm going to take this to my gaming group tonight and suggest that we play this all evening long without them kind of screaming at me for the ridiculousness of the games that I would bring. And I made this bigger game. But what I realized is so many people are going to look at it and go, hey, cats, that's easy, that's light, that's a quick little game. And I didn't want them to buy it and then not be able to play it.
Yeah.
So having this secondary mode also means that if it's in a comic store or it's just in Waterstones at an English bookstore, if someone picks it up, they're always going to be able to play it, regardless of whether they play the kind of full game or just a subset of that.
I'm just thinking actually of our friends Scott and Amy. Amy's not a gamer by any means.
No.
And Scott does enjoy quite a complex strategic game, I would say. But this would be ideal for, because Amy has always wanted to get involved. She's always wanted to try. I remember we spoke about this before in the podcast. The first game that you ever played with Amy was Arkham Horror. And so that totally, she was just like, no, I'm done. I'm done.
And it was the old edition.
The old edition, yeah. But something like this where there is a more, not this, I don't want to say a simplified version, but there's one that's not quite so complex or,
I think the good thing is the more experienced gamer can still engage with it, but without feeling like they're necessarily having to pull their punches.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It also, it does so many different things because it drastically changes how long the game takes to play.
Mm-hmm.
So, with 4 people, it's going to take you an hour and a half, but the family mode is probably only going to take you about half an hour to 40 minutes, which means you can use it as a light gateway game for the filler kind of side of things at the start of the night, or you can use it as the full game. And the second thing is, the whole point behind the family mode was identifying the core importance of a game. And for me, with a game like this, where it's about getting points and having the most points, if I can create a small version of the game that you can play, and at the end of that session, you understand how you get points, you understand your objectives, you understand what you're trying to achieve and do, then later introducing complexities into stopping you being able to do that is an easier learning curve because you already know what your kind of focus is.
Yeah. So it sort of eventually you can remove those training wheels, for want of a better phrase.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you already know half of the game. You already know the core of what you're trying to do, and learning how to do that it's an easier step because you already feel confident. You already feel like I know what I have to do.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier about this perception that people seem to have about a game themed around cats being a lighter game or a party game. What do you think has cemented that perception?
I think it's just because that's the standard. And it's one of the things that's been really interesting about this whole experience for me, because obviously I'm running the Kickstarter at the moment, and what I like to do is I like to do something that's different. The City of Kings was always a very, very different game to what a lot of people assumed it to be. And with the Isle of Cats, it's that same thing, where I've kind of said, where's the hole in the market that I want to fill? I want to fill a good, solid, medium weight game that is cat themed and also polyomino based. And where it becomes really interesting for me is both the polyomino side of it and the cat side of it both fight me, because if you think of polyomino games, you think of Indian Summer, Spring Meadow, Cottage Garden, you think of Patchwork, you think of Copenhagen, you think of Ariel, you think of all of these different light games that are always very simple and very, very basic. So the perception is that you're getting a light, simple game. And then when you go to cats, it's that same thing. You think of games like Exploding Kittens, which is probably the most mainstream cat game. And not to say that there aren't cat games that are bigger, not to say there aren't polyomino games that are bigger, but both of these kind of, the core mechanic and the core theme are generally perceived to be lighter things. So the challenge I set myself was, how do you take these two things and create that heavier version? but the perception of it is very challenging because you always have to you have to find those triggers that make people start to gather, actually, maybe this is a little bit more than I initially perceived it to be.
Yeah.
So with Isle of Cats, you could almost say that you're filling that awkward polyomino shaped hole in the market.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love to say to people it sits somewhere between Barron Park and Feast Roden. There's big, giant, crazy game, tiny, kind of fun little game, and it's just somewhere in the middle.
You were saying before we came on the show as well about discovering that cats can be quite divisive, bizarrely. So what's the weirdest exchange you've had with regards to that?
I think that it's one of those things where there's always an element of kind of jokiness to it, but there are certainly people out there who, I think it's, if I say to you, would you like a cup of tea? And you say yes. And then I say, do you want milk or do you not want milk? Like, there's a very black and white answer to that. A lot of people love milk and a lot of people hate it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you wouldn't, if you said you wanted black tea and I put milk into it, you might still drink it, you might still put up with it. You're not going to have like the worst night of your life, but you're probably going to be very frustrated and you're going to be miserable and you're going to be moany about it. And I think like cats have that same thing because they're such a mainstream animal. They're so all over the internet. They're so everywhere that you have this constant running dialogue of I love cats or I hate cats.
Yeah.
And I think that it's not that anyone necessarily says anything weird. It's so funny how direct people are where they just say, I don't like cats, therefore I'm not going to look at this. And I find it intriguing because obviously that's totally within everyone's right to do so. But one of the things I've done is the cats in this game, they're not household cats. This is not your little kind of ginger cat that sits on the end of your bed every night. This is not my white cat who loves running around and kind of just sitting on my lap. These are fantasy cats. These are cats that have crystals growing out of them. These are cats that have horns. These are cats which are designed to be within the fantasy world of the City of Kings. So they're a little bit more than that. You can look at one of them and go, is that a cat or is it a reindeer? You can look at one and go, is that a cat or is it a rabbit? They're all inspired to be slightly less common cats than you might expect. And for me, I think a lot of people have enjoyed that, but I hoped that would help move us out of that I like cats or I don't like cats kind of category. But it didn't make a difference to those people. They're still cats and therefore they must be hated.
It's weird, isn't it, how selective people are with applying logic to that, because they'll not think anything about playing a game with zombies in it or betentacled cosmic monstrosities. But it's like, well, you don't actually like them. You wouldn't keep one in your house.
I'd like to think.
Yeah, but you don't mind playing a game with them in it. But so for some reason, just because there's cats in it, you can't play it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it is kind of fascinating to just see these perceptions. And it's the same thing as I was saying about the lighter polyomino games or the lighter cat games or the themes of things. Some people will play space games. Some people will play fantasy games. I will play both because I just like the variety of those experiences.
Yeah.
But you do have groups of people that have particular tastes. And I think it's one of the interesting things. And I think that was the challenge we were talking earlier about Wingspan that Jamie had when he, the publisher of Wingspan, is that when he kind of told distributors about this game, no one knew how anyone was going to react to a bird game. And it caused them all sorts of troubles for being able to kind of get the numbers right. Whilst with the Isle of Cats, it's kind of different because everyone thinks, hey, everyone loves cats. But there's a real clear divide, and it's actually not necessarily quite as all-encompassing as you might expect.
You mentioned just there about the cats being quite fantastical because they exist in the universe of the City of Kings. All of the games that you've released with the City of Games so far have been set in this same universe. Does that make designing games more challenging because they're all within the same universe, or is it the opposite?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, it's one of those things where there's so many sides to it. So it makes it more challenging because, yes, you've kind of got some constraints. It has to be within this fantasy world, and there's rules. Like, I don't have electricity in this world, so obviously that could be restricting in certain situations. But it's also quite freeing, and it allows for more creativity because now this world has grown so much, and there's so much story, and there's so much depth, and there's time, which just adds such levels of interest to kind of things. You don't consider the world, like the real world, as today. You think of it as all the different periods in time we kind of go through. And that just means that every time you come up with an idea, you have so many different paints to choose from. You've got so many different places. And I think a really good example of that would be when I first started this game, I knew it was going to be about cats. One of the initial inspirations was, why isn't there a polyomino game that uses cats? Because cats are known for stretching into all of these weird shapes and positions. So it just makes sense. Let's do it where every tile was a different cat in a different pose, because it's a natural thing. So that was the original. It's going to be cats. It's going to be polyominoes. It's going to be a medium weight game. Let's go with it. And to start with, when I was kind of just playing around the initial concepts, it was a house, and you were just a person who was crazy about cats, and you were trying to get as many cats into your house as possible. And I wanted there to be resources, so you had to use stuff to get these cats. So we ended up with like the cat shop, where you would be buying cats and putting them into your house. And then we kind of got the game working, like, to a degree where I was quite happy with it. And I kind of thought to myself, like, how am I going to theme this? Because the idea of playing a game where we're encouraging people to like go to a shop and buy cats and kind of cram them into their house, it just doesn't have the right message. Like, it's like, but that primary message for me is buying cats isn't necessarily, that's not what I want to be doing. Yeah. And so that was it. Okay, so we've got the concept, we know the mechanics, we're now gonna turn this into the City of Kings. And as soon as I had that thought in my head, I went, okay, so I've got a world where there's this evil villain who's destroying and killing everything. So why aren't we rescuing these cats? Why aren't we trying to save these cats? Why aren't we encouraging the concept of, adopting and helping and just kind of having that more positive vibe to it? So we thought, let's make this island in our world. Let's have it inhabited by these creatures. Let's give them a story. Let's give them history, a civilization that's been there for thousands of years. And now these cats are there. I didn't want a house because I thought a house was just plain. All polyomino games are just rectangular. I wanted something that was a more interesting shape, something that was more dynamic and more challenging. And I thought, well, if we're going to this island, then let's go on boats, because boats can be all sorts of interesting curved shapes that create all sorts of interesting kind of options and decisions. So as soon as this, you can hear my thoughts, the excitement it brings me, like that kind of process of having this fantasy world made this game have such a more creative, interesting, kind of positive theme than if I was sat there with nothing. So I see it in every way as kind of a positive thing to be doing.
It's interesting what you mentioned there about trying to move away from the hoarding of cats into the one house and veering more towards this message of animal rescue. Charlotte's sister,
yes,
has 2 rescue cats.
Yeah,
Fred and George.
Yep.
And they were rescued from a house that had over 70 cats in it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was like they needed to be like quarantined, so there was no. It was down. I think it was down in Liverpool or somewhere like that. So there was nowhere nearby that there was not enough places to rehouse all the cats. So about 40 of them were sent up to Scotland to go between the Cats Protection and the SSPCA, which is the Scottish equivalent of the RSPCA, to be rehoused, just because there was not enough facilities for them. And again, this whole idea about wanting to sort of rehome them and give them an opportunity, because I mean, one of the cats is quite curious. Fred, he'll come out and see what's going on. I've never met George yet. he doesn't come out from underneath the bed because
put a bit of trauma there.
Yeah, you know that's his safety, and he'll come out with my sisters there and stuff like that, and sit with my sister. But when there's people in the house, he won't come out. Whereas Fred's quite curious and wants to find out what's going on and stuff like that.
Yeah. And again, this is one of the things that I really wanted to do with this game, which was, rather than having cute, fun, party kind of cat games, just going to like, let's just look at real cats. Let's look at the way they behave. When you look at our tiles, the different pieces in the game, we've got nearly 200 individually painted cats across the whole game now. Like every piece has a unique cat on it.
Yeah.
And just trying to show those different types, you know, the playful cats, the tired cats, the scared cats, the kind of the grooming cats, just trying to get those personalities across in a more kind of, this is what it's like to have these creatures, is just more interesting. And don't get me wrong, you know, at its heart, this game is a fantasy fun game. But for me, as a cat lover and someone who's had a fair few cats over the years, it's just the way to kind of shine the positive and the real kind of side of cats into a game that we can sit down and play for an evening and just kind of see as a more kind of enjoyable experience.
It's quite nice to see, not just with what you're doing, Frank, but I think game design in general, people are trying to push the boundaries a little bit more, and you've seen quite a few games in recent years where they're exploring a bit more depth and sometimes even the sort of moral issues.
Endangered comes to mind, you know.
Endangered. I'm even thinking of Holding On.
Yeah.
It's the Troubled Life of Billy Kerr, I think is the full name of it. Whether or not these games are good or bad, I think in some ways isn't necessarily a problem. It's just that it's good that people are pushing the boundaries out, that it's, as much as I like games with flaming swords and zombies and all that, it is good to sometimes think about the deeper issues.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm trying to do, especially with games like The Isle of Cats, is really push this concept of it. You don't need to call the game, you know, Adopt Cats or Rescue Cats. You don't need to kind of have it's really dry, it's really dull, it's just about the kind of the message. And it's about finding a way to still create those flaming swords and those zombies and creating something that's a bit more fantastical, but still having an underlying message. So when you play the game, you get immersed, you get engrossed, you look for that satisfying experience we talked about earlier, and you have fun. But at the end of the game, you're just left with this kind of little dwelling message in the back of your head of, you know, rescuing cats is a good thing, you know, and it just kind of, it helps you get the message across without having to be so in your face about it.
That got very deep quite quickly.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
You look excited.
Everyone thought it was going to be a little fun cat game. And suddenly we've got into emotions, we've got into seriousness, and, you know.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's go and adopt all the cats, Ben.
Yeah. but not too many.
Not too many.
We're trying to send a positive message.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't hoard cats, kids.
We're struggling with the one that we have at the moment.
Yeah. Yes, we are. That is about all we've got time for. But before we sound off, Frank, if people are interested in the City of Games and Isle of Cats, where should they go?
So the easiest place to go to is our website, which is www.thecityofkings.com, and that has all of our stuff encompassed. On Twitter and Facebook, you can find us at City of Games HQ, and of course, you can find the Isle of Cats on Kickstarter for the next few weeks as well.
Brilliant.
There we go.
Excellent.
Frank, thank you very much for joining us.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. I love coming on and chat with you guys, and hope we can do it again soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure we will. And for our listeners, wherever you are, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.